Hey, babe, guess who just called me? Olivia's voice was a burst of excitement as she paced around her apartment. Her fiancé, Ethan, was standing by the kitchen counter, pouring a cup of coffee, raising an eyebrow at her as she walked into the room. Who? He asked, flashing her a playful grin as he sipped his coffee. It was Grace. She said she's planning something special for my bridal shower. Isn't that sweet? Ethan's grin faltered for a split second, barely noticeable, but Olivia caught it. He shrugged before replying, Grace? Your sister, Grace? I thought you said you weren't really close these days? Olivia sighed and plopped down on the couch. We haven't been, no. But she's still my sister, Ethan. I think she's trying to make amends, you know? We had a rough patch, but family's family. Yeah, Ethan muttered, stirring his coffee a bit too vigorously. I just hope she's genuine. What's that supposed to mean? Olivia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just a bit. Ethan put the cup down, crossing the room to sit beside her. Liv, don't get me wrong. I'm all for reconciliation, but Grace, she's got a way of making everything about her. She hasn't exactly been kind to you in the past. Olivia crossed her arms, defensive now. I know, but she's my sister. You didn't grow up with her. You don't understand. Ethan exhaled slowly, his voice softening. Look, I love you, okay? And if you want her there, I'll support that. I just don't want her to. I don't know. Complicate things before the wedding. Olivia paused, biting her lip. She wouldn't. I mean, she's never really been that bad. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Really? Last time I checked, she accidentally spilled wine on your new dress. And what about when she conveniently forgot to invite you to that family dinner last Christmas? Olivia waved her hand dismissively. That's old news. Grace was going through stuff. People change. He sighed, knowing when to back off. Okay, I'll trust you on this. Just be careful. Olivia gave him a reassuring smile, but deep down, Ethan's words echoed in her mind. Grace had always been the wild one, the manipulative one. Maybe she was being naive, but Olivia wanted to believe her sister could change. A week later, Grace showed up at Olivia's apartment unannounced, dressed in her typical fashion, over-the-top glam. She wore a red mini dress that seemed a little too revealing for a casual visit, paired with stiletto heels that clicked loudly on the floor. Hey, sis, Grace chirped as she flung her arms around Olivia. You're glowing. Pre-wedding glow or just happy to see me? Both? Olivia smiled, hugging her sister back, though the grip was a bit stiffer than she intended. I brought champagne, Grace declared, holding up a bottle of expensive-looking bubbly. We need to celebrate. When's Ethan coming home? We can all have a toast. Olivia smiled, but there was something unsettling about Grace's enthusiasm. He's working late today, just us girls for now. Grace shrugged, unfazed. Even better. So, how are the wedding plans going? Is Ethan helping out, or is he one of those hands-off grooms? Olivia chuckled. Oh, he's been helping a lot. We've got everything pretty much set. Grace rolled her eyes, smirking. Of course, Mr. Perfect would be all about it. Must be nice having a fiancé who isn't a complete idiot. Olivia laughed nervously. Grace, I'm just saying, most guys don't care about centerpieces and floral arrangements. But not Ethan, huh? Lucky girl, Grace said, her tone carrying an undercurrent Olivia couldn't quite place. Olivia poured 2 glasses of champagne and handed one to Grace. I am lucky, she said, a slight edge in her voice. And you'll get there, too. It just takes time. Time, Grace echoed, taking a sip. Or maybe it takes finding the right guy. Who knows? Maybe someone who's already perfect. Olivia's smile faltered. Grace, what's going on? Grace laughed, loud and bright. Nothing. Relax, Liv. I'm just teasing you. But Olivia's instincts flared. There was something in Grace's eyes, a hunger, a challenge. Before she could say anything else, Grace set her glass down and stood up. You know, I could help Ethan plan some of the last-minute stuff if you're busy. I've got great taste, and you're always so overwhelmed with work. I wouldn't mind stepping in. Olivia stiffened. That's sweet of you, but I've got it covered. Grace shrugged casually. All right, if you're sure. But if you ever need me. Later that night, after Grace left, Olivia found herself staring at her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen, contemplating calling Ethan to tell him about Grace's offer. But she hesitated. Was she overreacting? Was she reading too much into things? The thought nagged at her, though. Ethan's words echoed again in her mind. Just be careful. The following weekend, Olivia was at a dress fitting when she got a text from Ethan. Hey, your sister dropped by to check in on things. Said you asked her to come over. Is that true? Olivia's heart raced as she read the message. Her fingers moved quickly over the screen, typing back, "No. I didn't ask her to." What did she say? Ethan's reply came almost instantly. "Nothing weird, yet, but I'll keep you posted." Olivia's stomach twisted. Something was definitely off. Grace wasn't just being friendly, she was scheming. And Olivia had no idea just how far her sister would go to sabotage everything. It was late in the evening when Ethan walked through the front door, his expression unusually tense. Olivia was sitting on the couch, thumbing through her phone, waiting for him. She looked up, immediately noticing the dark cloud in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. Ethan dropped his keys on the counter with a little too much force, running his fingers through his hair before answering, "Your sister." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. What about Grace? What happened? Ethan let out a frustrated sigh and took a seat beside her. He hesitated for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts, before speaking. She's definitely not just checking in on us like she claims." "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, though deep down, she feared the answer. "She came over today, again, while you were at work," Ethan began, his tone measured. "She brought over some wedding magazines, talking about floral arrangements and seating charts." At first, it seemed innocent. But then, he trailed off, a tightness in his voice. "But then what?" Olivia pressed, her pulse quickening. "She started making these comments," Ethan continued, his eyes shifting uncomfortably. "At first, it was little things. Like saying how I must be so stressed with all the wedding stuff and how she could help take some of the burden off me." Olivia frowned. "That doesn't sound too bad." "Right, but then it got weird," Ethan said, his voice lowering. "She started saying things like, 'It must be hard for you to be with someone like Olivia, who's always so busy, and I bet you miss the days when you didn't have so much responsibility.'" Olivia's eyes widened. "What? Why would she say that?" "I don't know, Liv, but that's not all," Ethan said, leaning in closer as if the next part was too uncomfortable to say aloud. She touched me." Olivia's blood ran cold. "Touched you? How?" Ethan swallowed hard, clearly struggling with the words. "She put her hand on my shoulder at first, then she started trailing her fingers down my arm. She kept saying how you were so lucky to have someone like me, and how any woman would kill for a guy like me." It was uncomfortable, Liv. Really uncomfortable. Olivia sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she was hearing. Her mind raced, torn between disbelief and anger. She did that?" Ethan nodded, his face somber. "I didn't want to freak you out, but I needed to tell you." I pushed her hand away, told her I was uncomfortable, and she just laughed it off like it was some kind of joke. She said I was overreacting, and that she was just being friendly. "That's not friendly," Olivia blurted out, her voice rising with disbelief and fury. What is wrong with her?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, tension radiating from him. "I didn't want to make a big deal of it, but it feels off. I mean, I know she's your sister, but—" "No," Olivia interrupted, shaking her head vehemently. "You're right, this isn't okay. She's crossed a line." There was a long pause as they both sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Olivia felt a flood of emotions: hurt, betrayal, confusion. She had always known Grace could be selfish, manipulative even, but this was something else. "What do we do?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice filled with concern. "I don't want to ruin things between you and her, but I can't just let this slide either." Olivia's mind raced. She had spent her whole life giving Grace the benefit of the doubt, excusing her behavior, hoping she would change. But this was too much. Grace wasn't just being difficult, she was actively trying to sabotage her happiness. "I'll talk to her," Olivia finally said, her voice firm. "I need to confront her about this. She can't keep doing this." Ethan nodded, but there was still a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Are you sure she'll listen? I mean, she doesn't seem like the type to take responsibility for her actions." "She'll listen," Olivia said, though she wasn't entirely sure of that herself. "She has to." The next day, Olivia called Grace, asking her to come over. Her hands trembled as she held her phone, the knot in her stomach tightening with every ring. When Grace finally answered, her voice was chipper, as if nothing had happened. "Hey, sis, what's up?" Grace's voice was all too cheerful. "We need to talk," Olivia said, trying to keep her tone steady. "Can you come over later?" Grace paused for a moment, her tone dropping slightly. "Sure, is everything okay?" "Just come over," Olivia replied, avoiding the question. A few hours later, Grace strolled into Olivia's apartment as if nothing were amiss. She was wearing another attention-grabbing outfit, tight jeans and a low-cut blouse, her blonde hair flowing down her back like a waterfall. She grinned as she entered, but Olivia didn't return the smile. "What's up?" Grace asked, her eyes flicking around the room before settling on Olivia. "You sounded serious on the phone." Olivia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Grace, I know what you've been doing." Grace raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," Olivia shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. "Ethan told me everything. The comments, the touching. You're trying to come between us." For a brief moment, Grace's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, laughing as if Olivia had just told a joke. "Oh, come on, Liv. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I was just being playful. Ethan's a good guy. I was just teasing." "Teasing?" Olivia's voice trembled with anger. "You were flirting with my fiancé, Grace. Do you even hear yourself?" Grace rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "You're so uptight, Liv. I was just messing around. You know I would never actually try to steal him from you." Olivia's eyes narrowed, her chest tight with emotion. "It didn't feel like messing around, Grace. It felt like you were trying to undermine my relationship. And I'm not going to let you do that." Grace's face hardened, the fake cheerfulness draining away. "So what? You're going to turn this into some big drama? I was just having fun." "Fun?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Is that what this is to you? A game?" There was a moment of tense silence as Grace's eyes gleamed with something darker, something Olivia hadn't seen before. A mix of jealousy, bitterness, and resentment. "I think," Grace said slowly, her voice dripping with venom, "that you're scared. Scared that Ethan might actually find someone better. Someone who isn't so uptight. Someone like me." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as Grace's words hit her like a punch. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was betrayal in its purest form. The words hung in the air, sharp and venomous, cutting Olivia deeper than any wound she'd ever felt. She stared at her sister, the woman she had defended, loved, and forgiven countless times. This wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore, it was pure malice. "You've got to be kidding me," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "You really think Ethan would choose you over me?" Grace's eyes glittered with cold confidence. "Why not? I mean, let's face it, Liv. You've always been the good one, the boring one. The one who plays by the rules. But I'm the one people notice. I'm the one who knows how to make life exciting." "Exciting?" Olivia scoffed, her anger rising to the surface. "You mean selfish, manipulative, and reckless? That's not exciting, Grace. That's destructive." Grace shrugged, her casual demeanor making Olivia's blood boil. "Call it what you want. But deep down, I think you know he's out of your league. I'm just giving him an option." Olivia's fists clenched at her sides. The sheer audacity of Grace's words was infuriating. "You're disgusting. Do you even hear yourself? You're talking about my fiancé. The man I'm going to marry in a few weeks. How could you do this to me?" Grace's expression hardened, and for the first time, the mask of charm and humor slipped away completely. "Because you've had everything handed to you, Liv," she spat, venom dripping from her words. "The perfect life, the perfect fiancé, the perfect job. I'm sick of it. I've had to fight for every scrap of attention, and you just get it all without even trying. I deserve something, too." Olivia's jaw dropped in shock. She had never heard Grace speak like this, never seen this level of resentment bubbling beneath the surface. "So this is about jealousy?" Olivia asked, her voice shaking. "You're willing to ruin my life because you're jealous?" Grace laughed bitterly. "It's not jealousy, it's reality. You think you're better than me because you followed all the rules. But guess what, Liv? Life's not fair, and sometimes, people like me get tired of watching people like you win every time." Olivia's heart pounded, the weight of her sister's words sinking in. She had always known Grace had issues with envy, but she had never imagined it ran this deep. All the passive-aggressive comments, the forgotten invitations, the subtle digs, suddenly, they all made sense. Grace had been harboring this resentment for years, and now, she was using Olivia's wedding as the battleground. "Grace, this isn't a game," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "This is my life, and if you can't respect that, then maybe you don't deserve to be a part of it." Grace's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Olivia saw a flash of something vulnerable in her sister's gaze, something almost desperate. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a smirk. "Fine," Grace said, standing up, her posture full of arrogance. If you want to throw me out of your life, go ahead. But don't think for a second that I'm going to grovel. Ethan will come around, Liv. Men always do. You're delusional, Olivia snapped, standing up to face her sister head-on. Ethan loves me. He's not interested in you, Grace. And the fact that you even thought this would work just shows how twisted you've become. Grace raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a mocking smile. We'll see. Without another word, she turned on her heel and strutted out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. Olivia stood frozen for a moment, her mind spinning. Her hands shook, and she felt a knot of nausea twisting in her stomach. How had things gotten so far? How had her sister become this monster? Later that night, Olivia told Ethan everything. She had tried to stay calm, but as the story spilled out, her voice wavered, her anger and hurt surfacing with every word. Ethan listened, his face growing darker with each detail. I should have seen this coming, Olivia said, her voice thick with frustration. I ignored the signs because I wanted to believe she could change. I didn't think she'd actually go this far. Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You couldn't have known, Liv. This isn't your fault. I feel like I've been so blind, Olivia said, shaking her head. I kept defending her, even when she was awful to me. I kept making excuses because she's my sister. But this is unforgivable. Ethan frowned, his brow furrowing in thought. What are you going to do? Olivia sighed, running her hands through her hair. I don't know. I have to confront her, tell her she's not welcome at the wedding anymore. She can't be there after what she's done. Ethan nodded, though a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. Do you think she'll actually stay away? Grace doesn't seem like the type to take no for an answer. That's what worries me, Olivia admitted. She might try to pull something. Ethan was silent for a moment before speaking again. What if we put a stop to this before it gets worse? Olivia looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Ethan pulled out his phone, a thoughtful expression on his face. What if we caught her in the act? Recorded it, that way, there's no denying it. No excuses. You'd have proof. Olivia blinked, surprised. You mean, set her up? Ethan nodded slowly. She's not going to stop unless she's exposed. And right now, it's just her word against mine. If she tries something again, we could catch it on camera. She won't be able to weasel her way out of it. Olivia hesitated, her mind racing. It felt extreme, but the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Grace wasn't going to back down, and confronting her head-on hadn't worked. If they had proof, real, undeniable proof, Grace wouldn't be able to manipulate her way out of the situation. You really think she'll take the bait? Olivia asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Ethan nodded grimly. She's already shown she's willing to cross the line. If I give her another chance, I think she'll do it again. Olivia sat quietly for a moment, weighing her options. She hated the idea of setting up her own sister, but then again, Grace wasn't acting like family anymore. She was acting like an enemy, someone who wanted to ruin her happiness, her future. If this was the only way to stop her. Okay, Olivia said softly, her resolve hardening. Let's do it. The plan was simple, yet nerve-wracking. Ethan would casually mention to Grace that Olivia would be out of town for a day, giving her the perfect opportunity to try something again. They'd set up a discreet camera in the living room, capturing everything. Olivia hated the idea of baiting her own sister, but she couldn't ignore the lengths Grace was willing to go. The next day, Ethan sent Grace a message, just as planned. Hey, just wanted to let you know Olivia's out of town tomorrow. If you wanted to come by and help with those wedding details you mentioned, that'd be cool. The reply was almost instant. I'll be there, winking face. Olivia's stomach turned as she read the message. There it was, Grace's willingness to swoop in, thinking Olivia was conveniently out of the way. Tomorrow, everything would come to light. The day had arrived. Olivia woke up feeling a heavy weight pressing on her chest, a mix of dread and determination. Ethan had left early for work, leaving her in the apartment alone to prepare for what was about to unfold. She stared at the small hidden camera Ethan had carefully set up in the corner of the living room, disguised among books on the shelf. It felt wrong, setting a trap like this, but what other choice did they have? Grace had crossed every line imaginable. If Olivia didn't do something now, she'd never get her sister out of her life, or worse, Grace might try to wreck her relationship with Ethan forever. The hours passed slowly, each tick of the clock amplifying Olivia's anxiety. She couldn't be there when Grace arrived, so she planned to monitor everything from her phone. She had given Ethan a quick kiss before he left, though they both knew this was more than just a normal day. They were about to put Grace's intentions to the test. By mid-afternoon, Olivia was watching the live feed from the camera, holding her breath as she waited. A small part of her hoped Grace wouldn't show up, that maybe she'd come to her senses. But deep down, Olivia knew her sister far too well. Right on time, Grace's knock echoed through the apartment. Ethan, who had returned early under the guise of needing to get something done, opened the door. Grace stepped in, wearing a tight dress that was far too revealing for what was supposed to be a simple wedding planning session. Olivia watched as her sister flashed a dazzling smile at Ethan, her eyes lingering on him a little too long. "Hey, stranger," Grace purred, glancing around. "Where's Olivia?" Ethan played his part perfectly. "She's out of town, visiting her friend for the day. It's just us." Grace's smile widened, and Olivia felt her stomach churn. "Oh, really? All alone?" Grace asked, her voice dripping with suggestion as she walked deeper into the apartment, her hips swaying as if she were performing for Ethan. "Well, lucky me, I've got you all to myself." Olivia clenched her fists as she watched the interaction unfold. She wanted to scream at the screen, to stop this, but she knew she had to see it through. Ethan kept his distance, but Grace wasn't deterred. She dropped her bag on the counter, pretending to fiddle with some wedding notes she'd brought with her. "So," she said, glancing up with those calculating eyes, "how's the wedding planning going?" "Must be stressful. Doing all this for Olivia." Ethan shrugged, keeping his tone casual. "It's been fine. Busy, but nothing we can't handle." Grace sauntered closer, her fingers brushing against his arm. Olivia's breath hitched as she watched it happen in real time, her worst fears materializing before her eyes. "You know," Grace said softly, "it doesn't have to be this hard. You deserve someone who takes care of you, Ethan. Not someone who's always distracted by work or too busy to notice you." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he played along. "Grace, I think you're misunderstanding something here." "Oh, I'm not misunderstanding anything," Grace interrupted, her voice turning low and sultry. "I've seen the way you look at me, Ethan. You can't tell me you haven't thought about it. About us." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. Her sister was shameless, pushing every boundary without a care in the world. Grace moved even closer, her hand now sliding up Ethan's arm toward his shoulder. "You don't have to marry her. You don't have to settle for second best. You and I could have something real, something passionate. I could make you so happy, Ethan." Olivia felt sick. The bile rose in her throat as she watched her sister attempt to seduce the man she loved, right in her own living room. The way Grace leaned into him, the predatory gleam in her eyes, it was a side of her Olivia had never wanted to believe existed. But then, Ethan stepped back. "Grace," he said firmly, his voice hard. "That's enough." Grace blinked, momentarily thrown off by the sudden shift in tone. "I don't know what you think is happening here," Ethan continued, his voice growing more intense, "but I'm in love with Olivia. She's the only woman I want. This, whatever you're doing, it's not going to work." Grace's smile faltered. "Come on, Ethan, don't be like that. You know you don't really want her. You're just scared to admit it." Ethan shook his head, his voice icy. "No, Grace. What's happening here is you're making a fool of yourself. Olivia's out of town, but that doesn't mean I'm open to whatever this is. It's never going to happen." Olivia could see Grace's face harden as her mind worked, calculating how to salvage the situation. She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, so you're the perfect fiancé now, huh? Too good for me?" Ethan stared her down. "Grace, you're crossing lines. I'm not interested in you. You need to leave." Grace's face contorted, her fake charm completely gone now, replaced by something uglier, something vicious. "Fine," she spat, "but don't think this is over. She's not as perfect as you think she is. You'll come around." Olivia's hands shook as she watched Grace storm out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. She immediately called Ethan, her heart racing. "Liv," Ethan answered, his voice soothing through the phone. "Did you see it all?" "I did," Olivia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe it. She really tried to." "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice tightening. "But it's over now. We've got the proof. She can't deny it anymore." Later that evening, Olivia sat down with her parents in their living room, the camera footage ready to play on her laptop. Her parents had always been blind to Grace's manipulations, always willing to believe her excuses. But this time, there was no escaping the truth. As the video played, her mother's face paled, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. Her father sat stone still, his eyes narrowing with every word Grace said, his disappointment growing as the scene unfolded. When it ended, there was a long, heavy silence. I didn't want to believe it, Olivia said softly, breaking the tension. I didn't want to think she was capable of this. But there it is. Her mother shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. How could she do this? To her own sister? Olivia's father stood up, pacing the room. His face was stern, filled with anger and shame. This is unacceptable. She's not welcome here anymore. Not after this. Olivia's mother looked devastated, torn between her daughters. Olivia, sweetheart, we'll talk to her. We'll get her help. I don't want to see her, Olivia said firmly, her heart aching. She's gone too far this time. I can't have her in my life. Not after what she's done. Her parents exchanged a look, one filled with the weight of years of ignoring Grace's behavior, of excusing her actions. This time, there were no excuses left. Days later, Grace called Olivia, leaving a string of increasingly frantic voicemails. Her arrogance had been shattered, and now all that was left was desperation. But Olivia didn't answer. She had made her decision. The wedding went ahead as planned, without Grace. It was beautiful, filled with love, family, and friends who truly cared. As Olivia stood at the altar, holding Ethan's hands, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The storm that had been brewing in her life for so long had finally passed. Grace had tried to tear them apart, but in the end, all she had done was bring Olivia and Ethan closer together. Their love had weathered the storm, and now, they could finally move forward, free from the toxic shadow of Grace's manipulation. For the first time in years, Olivia felt truly free.